I hope all of you are doing well. My name is TS Sudhir and you're watching the SWS CBSE Class 12 English Literature course, English language, grammar, reading, everything. Okay, this particular video is going to be on the third level by Jack Finney. This is the first story in your Vistas textbook, the supplementary reader. Let me say this right at the outset that this is a complicated story. I had to read it some 7 to 8 times before I got a hang of it, and then I started enjoying it because every time you read, the first 2 3 times it went like a bouncer over my head. I'm not really used to reading science fiction. This one is about science fiction combined with time travel. Uh, so that makes it complicated, and he has added a lot of realistic elements to the concept of time travel that makes it even more complex and complicated. Okay, but after the third or fourth reading, I started noticing nuances which makes his story very interesting. So I'm going to go about it rather slow so that you understand and also enjoy it. Enjoy karenge to fir samajh mein bhi acha aayega, and then you'll be able to answer any questions coming from this particular chapter, the third level by Jack Finney. Now, before we get to the chapter, this is Jack Finney. Okay, and this whole story is about the Grand Central Station in New York. This is what it looks like, the one level. The whole question is whether there are two levels to this station or is there a third level? Is there a third level to this particular railway station in New York? And related to that, so what the author has done is to take something which is very routine, a railway station which everyone uses to commute to their place of work or to the place of their residence, and then related to the concept of science fiction and time travel more importantly. So this is so that, I put photographs so that you have a better understanding of what we are talking about, right? So this is one level of the station. There would always be, like even in metros that you would have seen, there are always different levels to a metro station. There is one going towards the eastern side, there is one going towards the southern side, especially when it comes to a junction. So there are 1 or 2 or sometimes even 3 levels to a metro station. One could be underground, the 2 could be overground. So this is the Grand Station, Central Station in New York. And as I said, we are talking about the concept of time travel. What exactly does time travel essentially mean? Time travel means when you are able to, or when you say that you are able to go to the past or perhaps the future while being conscious of your present. You're conscious of your present, but while being conscious of your identity in the present, you are able to travel to the past and experience some event that has happened in the past, or you go to the future and think about what could possibly happen in the future, right? In ordinary terms, this would be described as a hallucination, generally thinking too much without obviously being a reality, because time travel cannot really be a reality. So Jack Finney is known for his science fiction and thrillers. He's an American author, and it's quite a puzzling story. As I said, the ending is open-ended. Your conclusion, what you may make of the story, could be very different from my conclusion or someone else's conclusion, right? So it's an open-ended kind of a conclusion, and it is about the theme of escapism. This is a key word, the theme of escapism. See, in your question and answers, you're not expected to write very long answers, right? Except the one which is for 5 marks. But if you understand it, it makes it easier for you to even attempt the MCQs, because the MCQs I saw in the specimen paper, the options are extremely close to each other, very, very close to each other. So unless you know the very minute aspects of the story or the poem or the chapter, you will find it difficult to pinpoint the absolute accurate and the most appropriate option in the MCQ. सवाल 1 mark का है, but 1 mark भी क्यों छोड़ना, right? That's what our attempt is going to be, to explain everything thoroughly. I don't believe in doing summaries. Summaries तो आपको कोई भी कुंजी में मिल जाएगी. But if you read everything thoroughly, and you can see this at 1.5x speed, no issues at all. 2x speed अगर उतना समझ में आता है तो. But understanding is key, because the attempt is to score a 98, a 99 out of 100, maybe 100 on 100 if possible, right? So that is what is going to be the attempt as far as this particular course is concerned. Okay. and I'm going to give you all the question and answers which you possibly need. And if you read the question and answers after seeing the video, your understanding of the story will be absolutely thorough. Each chapter will have, some will have 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 kind of questions. So you'll have complete everything covered in those question and answers. Okay. But you're not supposed to share it with anyone outside because a lot of effort has gone into writing those question and answers. Okay. So what the character here is doing, a person called Charlie, who is 31 years of age, his desire to stay in the past, right? Or keep the past alive. That's what he really wishes to, because he wants to escape. What did I say? Theme of escapism. Because he wants to escape from the complexities of the present. He's not happy with the present, which is why he wants to escape to the past, specifically talking about the year 1894. Okay. I will talk about why 1894 also in the question and answers. Now, let me just tell you the story before we get to the actual text. It's about the Grand Central. This person thinks that there is a third level, and when he reaches the third level, he discovers a very different kind of world. He discovers that he can buy a ticket to go to a place called Galesbury in Illinois, where he has childhood memories, and he is not very happy with his present state of affairs. He thinks there's too much of insecurity, anxiety, fear, apprehension, everything, and he tells all this to his wife as well as to his psychiatrist friend called Sam. And then it so happens that he finds one day that Sam is missing, and then he gets a letter from Sam because Sam has managed to find the third level as well and travel to Galesbury, and there he's leading a very peaceful life. And he writes to Charlie saying that you should also try to find the third level. Please keep searching for it so that you and your wife can both come to Galesbury. This is in a nutshell. मैंने 5 लाइनों में story बता दी. Okay, मजा आया, interesting लगा. Now let's get to the actual story. Okay, this is the story. If you see here, a man hanging by a clock. In your textbook, the illustration is very unclear, right? I hope you can see it more clearly out here. There is some kind of a spacecraft here. There are buildings. There is the clock tower, and from the clock, the dials of the clock, this man is hanging to indicate time as an essential concept, part, aspect of this particular story. Now, let's go through it. I hope the font size is clear. Do you want me to make it even more big? It will go this side. Okay, I think I can make it even more big. Okay, I think now you should, in any case, you will have your book with you, so you should be able to read it. The presidents, because when it is very close, I can't read it. The presidents of the New York Central and the New York, New Haven and Hartford railroads will swear on a stack of timetables that there are only two. There are only two means there are only two levels. Okay, that there are only two levels. Okay, this is getting cut a little, I realize. Let me just reduce it a bit. I think now it's fitting in properly. Yes, perfect. So he says these are the different railway station managements, right? The New York Central, the New York, the New Haven and the Hartford railroads, they will say that there are only two levels. There is no third level. So they'll be very sure because they are the ones who have been responsible for the construction of that particular railway station. Okay, and they will swear on a stack of timetables because timetables are like Bibles for the railways, right? They need to be punctual and keep on time. So this is a kind of a subtle way of introducing humor into the story. But I say there are three. Charlie, is the narrator. Okay, so the whole story, and this is very important, please take note of it, that the whole story is told from the perspective of the narrator. So in your examination, you could always get question where you could be asked to answer a question from the perspective of, let's say, the psychiatrist Sam or the wife Louisa. Okay, you could always get a question like that. I have written a question like that in the question and answers. Okay, so this is from the perspective of the narrator. So you need to bear that in mind. Everything is from his point of view. Okay, which may or may not be true. But what it does is to give us a glimpse into his mind and more importantly, his state of mind. कि किस हालत में उसका मन है, उसका दिमाग है उस समय पर. Okay, because I have been on the third level of the Grand Central Station. Now, please note one thing out here. I don't know whether you have noted it. Okay, I want you to focus on one thing. Been has been put in italics, which means that this is like from the author saying that, well, he's saying that he has been on the third level of the Grand Central, but don't believe him. We can't be sure. He could well be hallucinating. He could well be imagining things, right? So this been in italics, unlikely that you'll get a question ki been italics mein hai uske bare mein batao. But I just want you to notice this subtle nuances in the story, which is why I said I read it some 8 times for me to notice. First 3-4 readings I didn't even notice that it is in italics, right? But that's what you do when you read literature over and over again, and that's when you see the little things that the author has introduced in the story. Okay, now yes, I have taken the obvious step. I talked to a psychiatrist. Obvious, why is it an obvious step? It is an obvious step because there is no third level. But I say that I have been on the third level. How can you go to a level which does not exist at all? I say that I have met Mr. X, but Mr. X died 20 years ago. How is it possible that you would have met Mr. X? It's the same thing. So what will I do in that case? I will go and consult a psychiatrist कि मेरी दिमागी हालत ठीक नहीं है. I'm imagining things. I'm imagining meeting someone who died 20 years ago. Similarly, here Charlie is imagining being on the third level of a railway station in New York, which does not exist, right? So I talked to a psychiatrist friend of mine. This friend of his is Sam Wiener, among others. So he has spoken to others, which could well mean his wife. I told him about the third level at Grand Central Station, and he said this is an important key phrase. That it was a waking dream wish fulfillment, which means that he is dreaming of being on a third level, that he is dreaming that there is a third level and that dream is getting fulfilled. He's imagining that there is indeed a third level in existence. He said, I was unhappy. And he relates it to the fact that he is not happy and he is seeking escape by imagining certain things exist which he wants them to exist. Okay, that made my wife kind of mad, because the moment he says that you are unhappy, it correlates directly to his wife, that his wife is not able to keep him happy, that there is tension in their marital life. So his wife, mad does not mean pagal. Mad means angry. Okay, but he explained that he meant the modern world is full of insecurity, fear, war, worry, and all the rest. These are key phrases, keywords. Please, you need to, when you are writing, especially the longish answer, you need to include all these key phrases. This one and this one. Okay. And all the rest of it, and that I just want to escape. Okay. Let me just scroll it up a little. Arey, is tarah se kyun aata hai isme? It's very strange. This is a question. I don't know why it comes in this thing. This is from the NCERT PDF itself. Okay, let me, arey. Okay, are you able to see it? Yep. And that I just want to escape. Well, who doesn't? Who doesn't means he's saying, well, who doesn't? I mean, who doesn't want to escape from his or her own life? Everybody I know wants to escape, but they don't wander down to any third level at Grand Central Station. That there are many people I know who want to escape, but they won't just go to the third level, to the imaginary third level at the Grand Central Station. Not imaginary as per Charlie. He believes it's true. But that's the reason he said, and my friends all agreed, that he has told many other friends. Everything points to it, they claim. My stamp collecting, for example. So the stamp collecting is an important kind of an part of this story. In fact, that's an important, I would say, vehicle for the story. That's a temporary refuge from reality. Stamp collecting is described as a temporary refuge from reality. What does it mean? That you indulge in stamp collecting. What is stamp collecting? When you collect postage stamps of a time from the past. है ना? So you are kind of thinking about the past. You are imagining that you are in a particular era. You know, if in this year, I start collecting stamps from 1857. Let's imagine, okay, 1857 or 1947. You are kind of imagining what would have happened, what could have been the story behind the person who is there on the postage stamp, or the building which is there on the postage stamp, etc. Well, maybe, but my grandfather did not need any refuge from reality. Why? Because his grandfather was also into the hobby of stamp collecting. Things were pretty nice and peaceful. So he says that if they are saying that this is stamp collecting hobby is a temporary refuge from reality, well, not so, because my grandfather in his times everything was nice and peaceful and pretty, which means that he believes that it is not the same anymore, just like what his psychiatrist friend has said. Okay, so he says in his day, from what I hear, and he started my collection. It's a nice collection, 2 blocks of 4, practically every US issue first day covers. What is this first day covers? I will explain to you in just a bit. Okay, I mean it's explained later on in the story. And he started my collection. President Roosevelt collected stamps too, you know. So he's trying to justify the fact that he's not trying to have a temporary refuge from reality. His grandfather was into stamp collecting, and President Roosevelt of the USA also was into stamp collecting. So that's what he wants to establish. Anyway, here is what happened at Grand Central one night last summer. Okay, so he's talking about a thing from the past. I worked late at the office. I was in a hurry to get uptown to my apartment, so I decided to take the subway from Grand Central because it is faster than the bus. So he decided to, use the transport from Grand Central. This is pretty simple. Nothing really to explain out here. But what is important is that he was working late at office, which means that he would have been under stress. After a very long day, he would have been tired. His mind would not have been fresh. And therefore, that gives rise to the possibility of him imagining things or hallucinating. Okay, so work late at office is an important information line in this particular paragraph. Now, I don't know why this should have happened to me. I'm just an ordinary guy named Charlie, 31 years old, and I was wearing a tan gabardine. Tan gabardine is a slightly woolen kind of a thing, normal kind of a coat, and a straw hat with a fancy band. Okay, I passed a dozen men who looked just like me, which means that this person is not someone who would stand out in a crowd. Charlie is not someone who would stand out in a crowd. There are others also who look like him. So he's pretty much a face in the crowd. So he's not someone extraordinary, okay, by his own admission. And I wasn't trying to escape from anything. I just wanted to get home to Louisa, my wife. So he's saying I was not trying to escape. I wanted to really get back to my home and to my wife. I turned into Grand Central from Vanderbilt Avenue and went down the steps to the first level. The photograph that I showed you, where you take trains like the 20th century. Then I walked down another flight to the second level, okay, both of which exist, where the suburban trains leave from, ducked into an arched doorway heading for the subway and got lost. This is important. After the second level, he got lost. Now, this is a hint that the author is giving that, see, this is what possibly happened. Now, what happened after this is important. That's easy to do. I have been in and out of Grand Central hundreds of times, but I'm always bumping into new doorways. I'm always bumping into new doorways and stairs and corridors. Once I got into a tunnel about a mile long. So there is an element, we don't know whether it's an exaggeration, and came out in the lobby of the Roosevelt Hotel. Another time I came up in an office building on 46th Street, 3 blocks away. New York is made into different streets and blocks. This is very much a part of the postal address of any place in New York. Okay, a lot of skyscrapers all over the place. What is important here is that it's a confusing place. You get lost. Yet another indication by the author that the place is not very easy to navigate through. Okay, you have the possibility of getting lost inside the Grand Central Railway Station. Sometimes I think, now this paragraph I found very fascinating. Sometimes I think Grand Central is growing like a tree, pushing out new corridors and staircases like roots. So he thinks that, he's imagining. Now you can imagine. Now this paragraph is an indication that this person has a rather fertile imagination. He's thinking that, it's almost like spreading roots and going into different places. Possibly that's the reason people get lost out here also. Pushing out new corridors. You don't know, so you get lost, and sometimes a tunnel which is about a mile long. Okay, highly unlikely, right? Uh, there is probably a long tunnel about nobody knows about, feeling its way under the city right now. So just imagine, he's imagining that the central is like a tree and its roots are going beneath the New York City, and they are going as corridors into different parts of the city underneath the roads. Very sinister and very Daravna kind of a description if you think of it. Okay. And there are tunnels. Tunnels are what? Tunnels are dark. Remember this. Okay. On its way to Times Square. Times Square is the major landmark in New York. You know, there are those steps, and that's where music, dance, you know, there are huge billboards and stuff like that happens. It's one of the most lively places in New York. And maybe another to Central Park. And maybe because for so many people through the years, Grand Central has been an exit, a way of escape. Maybe that's how the tunnel I got into. Let me just read it once again. I lost it at apne khayalon mein kho gaya main Times Square ke. Okay. And maybe another to Central Park, which is yet another major landmark. And maybe because for so many people through the years, Grand Central has been an exit. Has been put and as itals. He's not sure whether it is an exit, right? So he's put that in itals again. A way of escape. The Grand Central is a way of escape. It goes somewhere and you can go into any of the corridors and escape. So escape is a major theme in this particular story. Maybe that's how the tunnel I got into. Maybe it was an escape route. But I never told my psychiatrist friend about that idea. This particular paragraph he has not told Sam about. The corridor I was in began angling left and slanting downward, and I thought what that was wrong. But I kept on walking. Okay. All I could hear was the empty sound of my own footsteps. Just imagine there is no one around. You are in some kind of a corridor, empty corridor with no one around. So what would you hear? You would hear your own footsteps loud. It's like, you know, late at night, you're studying, everything is quiet, everyone has gone to bed. What would you possibly hear? The tick, tick of the clock. Normally in the daytime or when everybody's around, you would not even hear it. You wouldn't even notice it, right? But when everything is quiet, you would hear the of the seconds clock, right? Kabhi notice karna. But I kept on walking. All I could hear was the empty sound of my own footsteps. Empty because that's how it sounds a little hollow. And I did not pass a soul. That is, he did not meet anyone. Then I heard that sound of hollow roar ahead. That means open space and people talking. You know, when there is suddenly an open space, then you kind of, the sound effect is a little different, right? It's not hollow anymore. I mean, it is hollow in the sense that inside you would hear your own sound, and then later on you would hear other kinds of sounds. The tunnel turned sharp left. I went down a short flight of stairs and came out on the third level at the Grand Central Station. For just a moment, I thought I was back on the second level, but I saw the room was smaller. Now, these are the aspects which are different. I've written it in the question and answers, right? So you don't have to take down any notes. I've written it down, but these are aspects which you would need to remember, this particular part of the paragraph. There were fewer ticket windows and train gates, and the information booth in the center was wood and old looking, and the man in the booth wore a green eye shade and long black sleeve protectors because he has gone back to 1894. So this is about the fashion statement in 1894, and at that time this would have been the way a train station, information booth, etc. would have looked like. So he's going back in time. So he's right now gone back in time to 1894. The lights were dim and sort of flickering. Okay, then I saw why. They were open flame gas lights. They were brass spittoons on the floor. Spittoons is where you spit. And across the station, a glint of light caught my eye. A man was pulling a gold watch from his vest pocket. Vest is, you know, the top. This pocket is called the vest pocket. He snapped open the cover, glanced at his watch and frowned. Frown means he was unhappy. He wore a derby hat, a kind of a hat wearing which you go to the horse races, a black 4-button suit with tiny lapels, and he had a big, I mean, these are all the how a suit is stitched, etc. And he had a big black handlebar mustache, so a long mustache, right? The way I used to have before. Then I looked around and saw that everyone in the station was dressed like 1890s something. So he has now realized that the dressing sense reveals that they are all in another era. Okay, 1894 something. I never saw so many beards, sideburns. Sideburns is when you have a long sideburn, and fancy mustaches in my life. A woman walked in through the train gate. She wore a dress with leg of mutton sleeves and skirts to the top of her high button shoes. So the attire is all 19th century. Okay. Back of her, out on the tracks, I caught a glimpse of a locomotive, a very small Currier and Eves locomotive with a funnel-shaped stack, and then I knew. So you see, he has described in detail how the railway station looked, how the passengers were dressed, and how the brass lights, etc. were. All this to indicate that he had been transported to the late 19th century, 1890s something. To make sure, I walked over to a newsboy and glanced at the stack of papers at his feet. It's always a great indication, right? If you see the paper of the day, that will give you an idea about what is the date today, when exactly I am located, right? It was the World, and the World hasn't been published for years. So the year that this particular story has been written in the 20th century, the World was no longer getting published. So he knows that that's yet another confirmation for him that he is in another era. The lead story said something about President Cleveland. So it's not about President of the day in USA at that time. I have found that front page since in the public library files, and it was printed June 11, 1894. So he has been transported precisely to the 11th of June, 1894. Okay, I hope yahan tak ka story samajh mein aa gaya. I turned towards the ticket windows, knowing that here on the third level at the Grand Central, I could buy tickets that would take Louisa and me anywhere in the United States we wanted to go. In the year 1894, on the trains that were spoken about just a while ago, the locomotives, right? And I wanted 2 tickets to Galesburg in Illinois. Illinois is a state in USA. Have you ever been there? It's a wonderful town still with big old frame houses, huge lawns and tremendous trees whose branches meet overhead and roof of the street. Now he's talking about nostalgia. He's familiar with this particular place called Galesburg. And in 1894, summer evenings were twice as long and people sat out on their lawns. So it was a more relaxed lifestyle at that time in 1894. And people sat out on their lawns, the men smoking cigars and talking quietly, the women waving palm leaf fans with which you fan yourself, no ceiling fans, with the fireflies all around in a peaceful world. Peaceful world is a contrast to the world of anxieties that Charlie is going through, experiencing right now. To be back there with the First World War still 20 years off, 1894, 1914 was when the First World War started. So 20 years before that, which is why the world is peaceful. And World War II over 40 years. When did World War II start? 1939. That is 20 years after the end of the First World War in 1918-19, right? I wanted 2 tickets for that. I wanted 2 tickets into this peaceful world. Very important. I'm enjoying this story. I don't know about you. I hope you do. Maza aa jata hai, to when you enjoy things, the process becomes easier. The clerk figured the fare. He glanced at my fancy headband, but he figured the fare and I had enough for 2 coach tickets one way. Okay. But now there is a twist out here. But when I counted out the money and looked up, the clerk was staring at me. He nodded at the bills. He looked at the currency notes that I had provided. The currency note that Charlie had provided are of this day, are of today, not of 1894. And that has changed. That ain't money, means that is not money, mister. And if you're trying to skim me, if you're trying to cheat me, you won't get very far. You won't succeed. And he glanced at the cash drawer beside him. Of course, the money was old style bills, half again as big as the money we use nowadays and different looking. I turned away and got out fast. There is nothing nice about jail even in 1894. So since he said that, you're trying to cheat me and you will not succeed, so this guy got a little nervous. He realized that, old currency was being used 1894, and this currency was not in vogue in 1894, June 1894. So he decided to get off in case if the person decided to hand him over to the police, because even in 1894, obviously there's nothing nice about jail. You know, it's a slightly humorous kind of a sentence. And that was that. I left the same way I came, I suppose. You will be able to read this in your book. I don't know why this is all come garbled in the PDF. Next day during lunch hour, I drew $300 out of the bank. Drew means withdrew. Nearly all we had means he left very little in the bank. So he decided that he's completely into it. So he decides to withdraw everything from the bank. Now this is happening in real. Okay, at least that's what we can assume. And bought old style currency that really worried my psychiatrist friend. You can buy, so this means that he has told Sam about this. You can buy old money at almost any coin dealers, but you have to pay a premium, because if you're buying something old, it's like, you know, if you buy something antique, you can't say, "Arey, to purana mal hai, kam hona chahiye." No, antique ka value zyada hone lag jata. You buy an old grandfather clock, or you buy some of those very antique kind of cupboards, etc., which were used 100 years ago, you know, which have been polished and renovated, and, you know, nice brass fittings, etc., very ornate. You need to pay a premium for that. Similarly, if you have to buy old currency, let's say if you want to buy something, a note which was used by some prominent leader in 1947, you need to pay a premium because you're buying something which is of antique value, right? So my $300 bought less than 200 in old style bills. So he paid $300, but he got out 200. So you see, he had only $300 in the bank. So it shows that Charlie and his wife are not a very rich couple, right? But I did not care. Eggs were 13 cents a dozen in 1894. But he thinks that $200 will be enough. Why? Because in 1894, eggs cost only 13 cents, right? For a dozen eggs, right? So he says, you know, since the cost of living was less, he would manage with the $200 also. So this is another interesting detail. But I have never again, say for instance, you could get a question, eggs were 13 cents a dozen in 1894. In what context does he say this? Why does it say this? And what does it show? So you should be, with all that I have told you so far, you should be able to answer it, right? But I have never again found the corridor that leads to the third level. So he has not been able to find it again at Grand Central Station, although I have tried often enough. Louisa was pretty worried when I told her all this and did not want me to look for the third level anymore. Okay. And after a while, actually, I stopped. I went back to my stamps. You know, he was happy with his stamp collection. But now we are both looking, both in italics, both he and Louisa, you know, both looking. Actually, even looking should have been in italics, but looking is a reality. Both means because, you know, both have now become part of the process. Why? Every weekend, because now we have proof that the third level is still there. How? Because my friend Sam Wiener disappeared, the psychiatrist friend, though he does not reveal that he's a psychiatrist. Nobody knew where, but I sort of suspected because Sam is a city boy and I used to tell him about Galesburg. I went to school there, his childhood, and he always said he liked the sound of the place, and that's where he is all right in 1894. So he thinks Sam has gone back to 1894 to Galesburg, where Charlie spent his childhood years. He went to school there. Because one night, fussing with my stamp collection, I found, well, do you know what? Now here he tells about the first day cover that he mentioned right at the beginning. What a first day cover is: when a new stamp is issued, I'll go about it slowly. Stamp collectors buy some of those new stamps, okay, and use them to mail envelopes to themselves on the very first day of sale. A new stamp is released, let's say today. I buy an envelope, okay, uske upar I put the stamp and I mail it to myself. So I put it in the letterbox, it gets delivered to me with the postage stamp of this particular day, right? Let's imagine 100 years later, my grandson, my granddaughter, whatever, right? They will see it and say that, oh, you know, this was the stamp, the first day cover of that particular year in the 21st century, right? So that's how it works. So the postmark proves the date. The envelope is called a first day cover. They have never opened. You have just put blank paper in the envelope. So you don't write anything, but it's just to kind of have some kind of a memory, have some kind of a official some kind of an official record. That night, among my oldest first day covers, I found one that should not have been there. Now, this is the part which is the most intriguing, the ending of the story. But there it was. It was there because someone had mailed it to my grandfather at his home in Galesburg. Now, I don't know how he got it to his particular address. That's a giveaway. That is not explained in this particular paragraph. That's what the address on the envelope said. And it had been there since 18 July 1894. The postmark showed that. Yet I did not remember it at all. So he's found it in some kind of a collection, right? Among my oldest first day covers, right? The stamp was a 6-cent dull brown with a picture of President Garfield. Okay. We need to check whether there was a president called Garfield of the USA. Huh? We need to check that. Yeah, I will check that and I will let you know. Naturally, when the envelope came to Granddad in the mail, it went right into his collection and stayed there till I took it out and opened it because he thought it was a first day cover. The paper inside, however, this time was not blank. It read because pehle otherwise first day covers mein nobody wrote anything. It was a blank paper that would be put. But here there is something written in this particular letter. This is the address, 941 Willard Street, Galesburg, Illinois, July 18, 1894. Charlie, I got to wishing that you were right. Then I got to believing you were right. I first wished that you were right about the third level. Then I started believing that you are indeed right about the third level. And Charlie, it is true, I found the third level. I have been here 2 weeks. And right now, down the street at the Dailies, someone is playing a piano and they are all out on the front porch singing, seeing Nelly home. So it's a very kind of a celebratory and a very relaxed kind of an atmosphere in Galesburg on Willard Street. And I'm invited over for lemonade. So it also shows a very genial hospitality culture, right? Where people invite home and you kind of have a good time. Come on back, Charlie and Louisa. Keep looking till you find the third level. It's worth it, believe me. It's worth it means it's worth going back in time to 1894. Because the life here is so much better in terms of quality. The note is signed Sam. Sam also written in italics. Okay. This entire letter written in italics. Which means the author is telling you that ये सही हो नहीं सकता, ये सब imagination हो सकता है, which is why he has put specific words in italics. At the stamp and coin store I go to, I found out that Sam bought $800 worth of old style currency. He had bought for 300, Sam had bought for 800, right? Worth of old style currency. That ought to set him up in a nice little hay, feed and grain business. Why? He can't do psychiatry business in 1894. So he'll have to find some other occupation. So he will be in some kind of an agriculture related occupation. He always said that that's what he really wished he could do. And he certainly can't go back to his old business of psychiatry. Not in Galesburg, Illinois in 1894. His old business, why Sam was my psychiatrist. Samajh mein aaya? Maza aaya? Now, the point here is that this is a story that needs suspension of disbelief. Please note down this phrase. What does suspension of disbelief means? Suspension of disbelief means when you are asked to or when you have to avoid critical thinking and logic in understanding something that is impossible. This you know is impossible, but you need to kind of suspend your powers of understanding and think that, okay, this may be possible. So you start kind of reading it and understanding what is possibly happening. And time travel is definitely one such impossibility. And that's why you need suspension of disbelief in this, not suspension of belief, suspension of disbelief. It's a slightly tricky kind of a phrase. Okay, I've written a whole lot of question and answers. Please go through it. Samajh mein nahi aaye to see the video again, because I think I've done justice to the way I've explained it. Please go through the notes, the basic pointers that I've written, and I think you should be fine. Any doubts? Of course, the chat box is there. We can ask the doubts. Tata, bye-bye. Thank you very much. God bless you.